Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 101, True Sea Bream Map, The Conquered Queen. Who are these two guys again? While Asahi Saiba and his companion were talking, Yuki also glanced at the two out of the corner of his eye. Asahi's desire for Yuki's 7-star knives was stronger than anyone else's. After Yuki's evolving touch improved, he obviously sensed those gazes and immediately locked onto Asahi. However, Yuki didn't recognize Asahi. He just regarded him as a particularly greedy fellow. After all, few chefs could see his set of 7-star knives and not be moved. Without paying further attention to others, Yuki directly activated his Inferno special ability. 4 pillars of fire suddenly surged upwards, the huge visual impact making it impossible for anyone to look away. So this is his Inferno ability. In a way, it's even more scary than your cross knives. Speaking of which, can your cross knives copy his special ability? Asahi Saiba's companion couldn't help but ask. Asahi's ability could copy special abilities, but he was very curious if Yuki's overpowered ability was among them. How would I know something like that? Asahi Saiba rolled his eyes. Actually, he was somewhat eager to try. If he could copy Yuki's Inferno ability, then he would really be invincible. At this moment, Yuki was making 4 dishes simultaneously. However, due to the flames obscuring everything, no one could clearly see what exactly he was doing. On the other side, Sarge had already finished cutting her ingredients and had also started the next step. Various bizarre kitchen utensils appeared, leaving the onlookers speechless. This match, one of the competitors enveloped everything in flames, making it impossible to see clearly. With an explosion, Sarge's dish was completed. On the other side, Yuki's flames disappeared. Sarge's cooking speed had caught up to Yuki's. This wasn't to say she could compare to Yuki in this aspect. There were multiple reasons. The True Sea Bream map Yuki was making required making 4 types of dishes simultaneously, so it was more annoying. Sarge's armed dish used special kitchen utensils, which sped up her cooking considerably. And the dish she made was very simple, a very exquisite sandwich. Yuki's True Sea Bream map had actually undergone some changes. The most important point was the outer layer of fish meat. Yuki made the outer layer of fish into grilled fish, which could also be considered a dish in itself. And after placing the 4 types of dishes inside, he continued to heat it, using his absolute control over fire to let the flavor of the fish meat permeate into the dishes a second time, making this dish, although it looked like 5 dishes, also capable of being considered one when fused together. Whether eaten separately or together, it was an excellent choice. This is grilled fish? You just grilled an entire fish like that? Looking at the fragrant grilled fish before her, Sarge couldn't help but frown. Although the aroma was indeed very rich, this grilled fish looked like a very normal grilled fish, the kind without any seasonings. This made her frown. It's not that easy. As Yuki spoke, the kitchen knife in his hand suddenly slashed. The next second, the grilled fish's body directly opened up, revealing the 4 dishes hidden within. The shape of the sea bream after opening up was precisely the shape of a map. It was actually hidden inside. And this shape. Looking at the dish Yuki presented, everyone was stunned. Just the appearance of this dish before them made it impossible to look away. Although Sarge's sandwich was very exquisite, compared to Yuki's dish, it was lacking by more than just a little bit. Placing the 2 dishes side by side, without even tasting them, Sarge's dish had already lost miserably. My dish is called the True Sea Bream map. We can taste each other's now, right? Yuki said. Hearing this, Sarge nodded. Although her dish lost miserably in terms of appearance, they hadn't eaten yet. Who knew what the taste would be like? Maybe she could win in terms of taste? The two tasted each other's dishes respectively. Although it was just a sandwich, Sarge's culinary skills were very good. And after the sandwich was completed, it was grilled. The effect of the final detonator explosion was like an oven. This sandwich was filled with the flavor of fire, the crispy outer skin paired with the internal ingredients. The texture was impeccable. Of course, the most crucial part was the impact this dish brought, that impact that made one uncontrollably want to regard Sarge as a queen. This impact was because of armed dish. For others, this dish was devastatingly powerful. But for Yuki, this dish had absolutely no effect. Whether it was soul-soothing esoterica or his emperor's culinary heart, neither would be affected. Why aren't you tasting my dish? What are you waiting for? Yuki saw Sarge wasn't tasting his dish but was staring intently at him and asked with some amusement. He had roughly guessed Sarge's thoughts. She wanted to see if he would be conquered by the dish. Actually, it wasn't just Sarge. Anyone who knew the effect of Sarge's special ability was now watching Yuki. Looks like my dish can't affect you. What a pity. Hearing Yuki's words, Sarge knew Yuki hadn't been affected, so she was somewhat disappointed. Afterwards, she turned her gaze to Yuki's dish. Yuki's dish looked so exquisite it made one reluctant to destroy it. However, this competition ultimately had to have a winner, so Sarge still took a bite. This one bite. Deliciousness exploded on her taste buds and quickly spread throughout her entire body. And this deliciousness, while distinct, also seemed to leave one wanting more. Sarge realized this and immediately tasted the second dish, then the third, the fourth, and finally, the grilled fish. When the final piece of grilled fish entered her mouth, a deliciousness several times stronger than before exploded. At the same time, Sarge found herself as if in an ocean of flames. A giant sea bream swam in the sea of fire. Above the sea of fire was an incomparably huge flame emperor. The moment she saw this flame emperor, an urge to kneel in reverence arose in Sarge's heart. And her body uncontrollably knelt towards the ground. Her consciousness was very clear now. She knew she was being affected, just like others were affected by her dishes. But she couldn't control her body. Just like that, under everyone's gazes, Sarge directly knelt on the ground. She knelt. How is this possible? In the past, it was always others kneeling after eating Sarge's dishes. How did it reverse now? The audience watched the scene before them with astonishment. In the past, many who had eaten Sarge's dishes couldn't control themselves and knelt to Sarge, even offering various benefits. But today, it was finally Sarge's turn to kneel to someone else. You've comprehended culinary heart. Are you already a special class chef? Sarge was completely terrified by this culinary heart at this moment. After finally recovering her senses, the first thing she did wasn't to stand up, but to look up at Yuki and question him. That's right. I've already mastered culinary heart. Looking at Sarge's appearance, Yuki knew that she had been affected by his culinary heart, otherwise, she wouldn't have directly knelt. I've never felt such a domineering culinary heart. This is what I've always been pursuing. At this moment, Sarge's eyes looking at Yuki seemed to carry flames. Of course, this wasn't anger, but a kind of craving. Although she hadn't reached first-class chef yet, she was close. So, she had also begun to think about her own culinary heart. Yuki's culinary heart was what she had always been searching for. So, at this moment, her gaze towards Yuki was incredibly fervent. And she knew very well that this culinary heart was definitely not something she could comprehend. Because the moment she knelt just now meant she couldn't comprehend culinary heart of this level. At this moment, she was completely convinced. Towards Yuki, her initial desire to conquer had transformed into complete submission. Yuki-sama, please allow me to pledge my loyalty to you. Although Sarge's body had returned to normal, she didn't stand up but directly chose to submit to Yuki. Looking at Sarge before him, Yuki fell into deep thought. Honestly, he was tempted. One reason was that Sarge was very beautiful. He was also a normal man and liked beautiful women. Another reason was that he had experienced the benefits of having a secretary during this period. Hisako Arado could arrange all sorts of work perfectly, without him needing to worry. Otherwise, although he could do those trivial matters, he would find them annoying. When he returned to Tatsuki, Hisako would definitely continue to be responsible for everything related to Arena. At that time, he wouldn't have a secretary, so Yuki also decided to find one. I'm lacking a secretary. Try it out first. If it's suitable, then stay, Yuki said after thinking for a moment. Sarge, whether in terms of appearance or culinary skills, was impeccable. But he didn't know if Sarge could be a good secretary, so he planned to try her out for a period first. I understand, Yuki-sama. Hearing this, Sarge's face lit up. She directly stood up and came to Yuki's side. It was clear she had genuinely submitted to Yuki. As expected of Officer Yuki, who has no prior battle record at WGO. To make this queen directly submit. Watching Yuki directly take Sarge as his secretary, the others were very envious. Being able to subdue Sarge was Yuki's skill. If it were them, they would only be conquered by Sarge. So, just being envious was enough. This match ended with Yuki winning. Many people wanted to take the opportunity to build a good relationship with Yuki, so they gathered around at this time. But Sarge had already entered her role. With a sweep of her chainsaw knife, those who wanted to get close were directly scared away. However, among these people, there were also some who weren't afraid of Sarge. Yuki noticed the person approaching. This was the person who had previously shown extreme greed for his knives. This greed was stronger than others, so much so that even Yuki noticed it. So, just as Sarge was about to stop him, Yuki stopped her. A pleasure to meet you, Officer Yuki. My name is Asahi Saiba, a midnight chef. Why didn't you let Ms. Sarge stop me? Seeing Yuki stop Sarge, Asahi Saiba introduced himself and then asked with some confusion. Asahi Saiba? That surname does sound familiar. As for why I didn't stop you, because just now, you showed strong greed for my knives. That kind of greedy gaze is hard not to notice. Yuki said. Hearing the name Asahi Saiba, he now knew why he was staring so covetously at his knives. Asahi Saiba's special ability mainly worked on knives. Seeing his set of knives, it would be strange if he didn't want to take them. Yuki hadn't expected to encounter Asahi Saiba here. A familiar surname? I remember Officer Yuki is from Tatsuki, right? You must know Joichiro Saiba. I am Joichiro Saiba's son. Asahi Saiba introduced himself. Yuki wasn't surprised at all that he called himself Joichiro Saiba's son. This guy was solely focused on wanting to replace Soma Yukihira. Yuki could only sigh. Joichiro Yukihira's charm was very immense. It was one thing for Irina Nakiri to regard him as an idol, but this Asahi Saiba was even more exaggerated, directly considering him his father. I know Joichiro senpai. But as far as I know, he seems to only have one son, right? He's my dorm mate at Polar Star. Yuki knew Asahi's meaning and also understood Asahi. But now, he naturally had to feign ignorance. It's Soma Yukihira, right? I quite envy him. Asahi Saiba didn't explain much but said Soma's name. He now had his own faction among the midnight chefs. You're Asahi Saiba? That rising star who just recently emerged? Sarge recognized Asahi. After all, Asahi had already made a name for himself among midnight chefs. Looks like I'm somewhat famous. Originally, my target this time was Ms. Sarge. But now, Officer Yuki has beaten me to it. In that case, Officer Yuki, would you like to have a match with me? Asahi Saiba directly stated his purpose. He had originally come for Sarge. But now Sarge had already been subdued by Yuki. In that case, he could only change his target to Yuki. He didn't expect to make Yuki his subordinate. His real target was Yuki's knives. But to get Yuki's knives, he could only find a way to compete with Yuki and make Yuki use the knives as a wager. Chapter 102, The Perfect Whetstone, Asahi Saiba the Knife Thief. You're after Yuki-sama's knives. The moment Asahi Saiba finished speaking, Sarge interjected angrily. She now considered Yuki her boss. Someone coveting her boss's knives obviously infuriated her. As a midnight chef, she had also heard of Asahi Saiba and knew about his special ability. Although Asahi Saiba hadn't explicitly stated what his special ability was, every time he competed, he aimed for the opponent's knives, and after seizing them, he kept them. The number of knives on his person grew larger and larger, making him look like a knife peddler. Moreover, when he cooked, many people noticed Asahi's abnormality. Once he used someone else's knives, it was as if he were possessed by the original owner of the knives. He could easily perform their signature moves and even use their special abilities. People weren't fools, they obviously knew Asahi's special ability was replication and was related to knives. As Asahi's fame grew, many chefs who knew his situation didn't want to compete with him. After all, not everyone wanted their knives taken away. Of course, there were exceptions. Never mind others, just look at Sarge here. Sarge knew what Asahi's special ability was. If she hadn't met Yuki, then facing Asahi's challenge, Sarge would inevitably have agreed. The reason was simple: Sarge had absolute confidence. She didn't think she would lose. This confidence stemmed from her formidable culinary skills. Although there weren't many like Sarge, there were some. This type of person, apart from a very few with blind confidence, others were all highly skilled. Yuki-sama, this guy's special ability is to copy others' culinary skills and special abilities by coming into contact with their knives. Sarge directly told Yuki about Asahi's special ability. As for what decision to make in the end, that was not her business. Copying others' culinary skills and special abilities, that's quite interesting. If I compete with you, what benefits can I get? Yuki asked, somewhat amused. Asahi's culinary skills could indeed serve as nourishment for him. Why should he agree? He was very curious about what kind of wager Asahi could offer. Hearing this, Asahi Saiba was taken aback for a moment. Facing Yuki, he really couldn't offer any good wager. In terms of strength, he wasn't sure if he could defeat Yuki. In terms of influence, the powers behind Yuki were much greater than his. It could be said that whatever wagers he could offer, Yuki already possessed. So, for a moment, he didn't know what to do. Can't think of anything? How about wagering your loyalty against me? Looking at the somewhat dazed Asahi, Yuki proposed his idea. But as soon as these words were out, Asahi directly shook his head. He wanted to challenge Yuki because he was after Yuki's knives. He wanted to replicate Yuki's culinary skills through Yuki's knives. He himself wasn't sure if he could defeat Yuki. After all, the culinary skills Yuki displayed just now were too astonishing. To rashly wager his freedom under such uncertain circumstances, he couldn't bring himself to do that yet. Since you don't want, then there's no need for more words. Sarge, let's go. Yuki didn't waste any more breath on Asahi. Although the other party could serve as his nourishment, not just anyone could challenge him. This precedent couldn't be set lightly, otherwise, there would be endless trouble later. As for Asahi Saiba, although he was the final boss and possessed an extremely strong special ability, he wasn't of much use to Yuki. In Yuki's view, Asahi's special ability was best used as a whetstone. Because as long as he obtained someone else's knives, he could replicate everything about them. Competing with Asahi under such circumstances was equivalent to facing one's own mirror image, even a mirror image stronger than oneself. Facing one's own mirror image, one could naturally see one's own shortcomings very clearly. So, Asahi's special ability was actually a very good whetstone. Of course, the premise was that this whetstone allowed you to sharpen yourself, otherwise, it was useless. And another point, Yuki felt Asahi was completely misusing his special ability. Through knives, one could replicate a person's special ability and culinary skills, but only when holding others' knives could this be achieved. It could be said that as long as Asahi obtained someone else's knives, it was equivalent to being able to unconditionally learn their culinary skills. Such an opportunity was quite rare. Even between teacher and student, often something would be held back. But his ability could achieve direct replication, equivalent to the other party unconditionally letting him learn. Asahi's special ability should have been about seizing others' knives and then continuously using these knives to learn various techniques and experiences, not just taking them out during competitions. In Yuki's eyes, Asahi had only used his special ability correctly once, the knife Joichiro Yukihira gave him before leaving. That knife was one Joichiro had used in the past, so Asahi learned Joichiro's culinary skills through that knife and used it as a springboard to rise quickly. This was the true use of cross knives. Subsequent uses, although they could allow Asahi's culinary skills to improve rapidly, as long as he switched to a different knife, Asahi's culinary skills would plummet. Sarge, after you've handled your matters, come find me at WGO headquarters. After returning to his residence, Yuki said to Sarge. Although Sarge was already his secretary, Sarge also had her own things to do. Yuki planned to let her handle her own affairs first. Rest assured, Yuki-sama. One day will be enough for me. My forces are mostly managed by my subordinates, there isn't much that requires my personal attention. Sarge stated. She only needed one day to resolve her matters and then follow Yuki. In Sarge's view, just following Yuki was enough, these other things weren't necessary. But on second thought, since she was following Yuki, she would naturally also unconditionally dedicate these things to Yuki. So, she couldn't just ignore them. One day is enough? In that case, I'll stay here one more day. Yuki nodded. Since one day was enough, then there was no need for him to go back early, he would wait for Sarge. Hearing Yuki's words, Sarge was very happy. After bidding Yuki farewell, she went to handle her work matters. As for Yuki, he stayed in his room to rest. However, when night came, something happened that left Yuki somewhat speechless. A thief had broken in. Although his hearing hadn't been enhanced, with the help of Food Honor, Yuki could clearly hear the movements around him. Someone suddenly entered the room. Although the movements were very slight, he still sensed it. The room was pitch black, but Yuki's vision had been enhanced, now he could also easily achieve night vision. He could clearly see a figure completely covered up sneaking into his room. Yuki recognized this person. It was Asahi Saiba, who had wanted to challenge him during the day. It seemed this guy wasn't planning to give up on his knives. But since he couldn't get them openly, he resorted to covert means. Yuki wasn't very surprised by this operation. This guy was a midnight chef, and in the original story, they had even kidnapped Irina Nakiri. Although it was just for fun, they indeed did it. Now, coming to steal knives was a very normal thing. Yuki just watched as the other party fumbled their way to where he kept his knives. Although Yuki's space could store knives, he couldn't just take things out of his space in front of others. So, he usually carried his knives with him. The knives were in a box on the table. Found it! At this moment, after Asahi Saiba felt the box containing the knives, he was overjoyed. During the day, he had memorized what Yuki's 7-star knife box looked like. Such a large box. Even in the dark, it was very easy to find. However, just as Asahi was about to take the knives away, he found this set of knives was surprisingly heavy. He had to use a lot of effort just to move the box. Asahi was somewhat troubled. It wouldn't be easy to take away these heavy knives. He had entered very carefully. Now, carrying those heavy things, wanting to leave silently seemed difficult. After thinking for a moment, Asahi's eyes suddenly lit up. The 7-star knife set consisted of 7 knives, all used by Yuki. For him, 1 knife versus 7 knives actually didn't make much difference. So, Asahi now planned to open the box and just take one of them. Thinking of this, Asahi carefully opened the box without making any sound. Then, he went for the smallest knife. For him, this one knife was enough. However, when he picked up the knife, he suddenly froze. Because he found that his special ability could copy very few things. Only some simple cooking experience. As for Yuki's Inferno special ability and other things, there was nothing. It was as if this knife wasn't Yuki's. What's wrong? Can you copy my abilities? Just as Asahi Saiba was puzzled, a voice suddenly sounded. The appearance of this voice made the hairs on Asahi's body instantly stand on end. However, his reaction was extremely fast. After dropping the knife in his hand, he immediately turned around, intending to run. Yet, before he could run out, a hand landed directly on his shoulder. Instantly, an immense force came through. Asahi only felt a sharp pain and simply couldn't break free. After Yuki grabbed Asahi's shoulder, he directly dragged this fellow and turned on the light. Looking at Asahi, who was fully armed with only his nose, mouth, and eyes exposed, Yuki estimated this wasn't the first time this guy had done something like this. He directly pulled off the mask concealing Asahi's face. "Now, is there anything else you want to say?" Yuki looked at Asahi Saiba, somewhat amused. When he discovered Asahi earlier, Yuki hadn't acted immediately. He was also curious about how much of his stuff the other party could copy. So, he let Asahi search here. It wasn't until Asahi picked up his knife and froze that he was certain Asahi couldn't copy his abilities and culinary skills, otherwise, he wouldn't have just stood there dazed. "I never thought I'd fall into your hands. Your strength is really something. I feel like my shoulder is about to be crushed by you." Knowing he couldn't escape, Asahi Saiba shook his head. Looking at Asahi's reaction, Yuki also found it somewhat amusing. His strength just now was indeed a bit much, and his hand was also gripping a joint. With a little force, Asahi's experience would definitely be particularly refreshing. "You were acting like a thief. Now that you're caught, you have nothing to say, right? Looking at you, you probably can't copy my abilities, can you?" Yuki said after putting the knife back into the box. "Indeed, I can't copy them. Only some basic experience. As for other things, it's as if it's a blank slate. This is the first time I've encountered this situation. Is that knife really yours?" Asahi Saiba was also very puzzled. He looked at the knife Yuki put back in the box, not knowing why his special ability had failed. Special abilities like these have upper limits. Once that limit is exceeded, the ability naturally becomes useless. Yuki shook his head. It would be a miracle if Asahi could copy his things. Keep in mind, Yuki's various abilities and techniques all came from other worlds. Secret techniques required a vast knowledge reserve and sufficiently strong physical fitness to perform. Asahi simply couldn't replicate them. The special abilities in this world had an upper limit. Yuki had broken the upper limit of the god's tongue, which was why Mana Nakiri could taste deliciousness. Asahi Saiba's special ability was limited to copying things from this world. And abilities like the god's tongue Asahi also couldn't copy. The upper limit of a special ability, huh? So, you've already surpassed the upper limit of special abilities. What a monster! Asahi Saiba was speechless regarding Yuki. This guy was terrifyingly strong in every aspect. Culinary skills being like that was one thing, but his combat power was frighteningly high. He simply couldn't muster any thought of resistance. Alright, we're done talking about special abilities. Now we should talk about how to deal with you. How about I send you to the police station? Breaking and entering, but you didn't steal anything. You'll probably be out after a while," Yuki said with a smile. As soon as these words were out, Asahi Saiba's face instantly turned black. If he were really sent to jail for breaking and entering at that, how could he ever show his face in the culinary world again? Chapter 103, Asahi Saiba forced into labor, Irina Nakiri's decision. Although many midnight chefs weren't clean, and some even had a lot on their records if exposed, the consequence was a dead end. Asahi Saiba had never heard of any midnight chef being sent in for theft. He could already imagine the looks he would get from others after coming out for such a crime. Probably the entire midnight chef community wouldn't acknowledge him as one of their own anymore. "As long as you don't send me in, I'll agree to any condition." Between social death and submission, Asahi Saiba decisively chose submission. It couldn't be helped, Yuki's move was too ruthless. He couldn't even imagine the consequences of him going in. "I thought you midnight chefs were all fearless. In that case, I'll give you a choice. Work for me. The time will be set for 3 years," Yuki said. It was a good chance to find a training partner for Megumi and the others. Let Asahi first copy Megumi and the others' culinary skills, then have him duel with them. This way, Megumi and the others' culinary skills would still improve very quickly. Using oneself as an opponent, one could very clearly see their own problems, even more effectively than Yuki directly pointing them out. This was like the difference between a theory class and a practical class. Some things you won't learn even if told 100 times. But with practical application, you might get it in one go. 3 years isn't that long. May I know what I'll be doing? Hearing it was only 3 years, Asahi breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't old now, so 3 years was acceptable. However, he was more curious about what Yuki wanted him to do. Very simple. Be a training partner for my companions. Your special ability can copy others' culinary skills. After copying them, you'll be like another version of them. In this situation, dueling with them will let them see their own shortcomings clearly. Yuki explained Asahi's job content. Hearing this, Asahi was completely speechless. Although he was very surprised by Yuki's operation, not expecting his ability could be used this way. But thinking about Yuki making him a training partner. Keep in mind, he was a top talent among the younger generation of midnight chefs, yet he became a training partner, and not even for Yuki, but for others. However, Asahi breathed a sigh of relief at this moment. What he most feared was that Yuki's arrangement would leave him no time to carry out his own plan. But now it seemed his plan could still proceed smoothly. After all, almost all the people around Yuki were at Polar Star. And the person he wanted to replace, Soma Yukihara, was also at Polar Star. At that time, he could get close to Soma. And then take everything from Soma, replacing him. Asahi Saiba's talent was indeed very good. But sometimes, he was very stupid. He himself knew his plan was somewhat useless. After all, in the end, he needed Joichiro's acknowledgement to replace Soma. But how could Joichiro let Asahi replace Soma? Asahi wasn't a fool, he naturally knew this point. But besides Joichiro, he had no other pursuits. He needed motivation, a goal. And this goal was Joichiro. Whether he agreed or not, this operation was similar to Obito Uchiha from Naruto. Obito Uchiha wanted to create a world with Rin, not revive Rin. They both belonged to people who completely lived in their own worlds, knowing very well it was useless but still wanting to do it. I agree. Asahi Saiba didn't hesitate much either and directly nodded in agreement to Yuki's request. Anyway, it was only 3 years. And he could still continue with his own plan. It was much better than going in to do time for a while. Very good. You can leave now. Report tomorrow and come back to WGO with me, Yuki said. You're just letting me go like that? Not afraid I'll just run off? Hearing this, Asahi said with some surprise. Keep in mind, he had entered without being caught on camera, very well hidden. Once he left, if he didn't come, Yuki would have no way to deal with him. You don't have to come if you don't want to. But the consequences. You'll have to bear them yourself. Yuki smiled. With his current power, wanting to deal with someone like Asahi, who had no backing, was almost too easy. And Yuki knew that Asahi, apart from his obsession with the Yukihira father and son, wasn't very detestable in other aspects. I understand. Hearing this, Asahi remembered that behind Yuki stood WGO. The existence of this organization completely suppressed the midnight chefs, making them unable to breathe. So, he was certain that if he really ran off, unless he found a place to live in isolation, if he was found by WGO people, he would be in big trouble. Soon, Asahi left. Arriving outside the building, looking at the building before him, Asahi couldn't help but sigh. A moment of greed, he never thought it would end up like this. Shaking his head, Asahi left. After all, the path was chosen by him. No matter how it turned out, he needed to bear the consequences. The night passed quickly. Early the next morning, Sarge returned to the hotel. But what surprised Sarge very much was that she met Asahi Saiba outside. Why are you here? Are you still trying to covet Yuki-sama's knives? I'm not here for the knives. You'll know in a bit. Asahi Saiba shook his head. Yuki's knives, he didn't covet them at all now. Even if Yuki's knives were given to him, they would be useless. Wanting to copy everything about Yuki through the 7-star knives was wishful thinking. As for learning to skillfully use the 7-star knives himself, Asahi had already experienced the weight of the 7-star knives. Those knives, even if given to him, he would need to spend a lot of time learning. Anyway, he didn't covet these knives at all now. The gap was too large. He didn't say the real reason he was here. Although he knew Yuki would definitely tell Sarge later, it was better for it to come from Yuki's mouth than his own. Even now, he deeply regretted it. Why on earth did he get possessed last night and try to steal the knives? Looking at Asahi before her, Sarge, although full of questions, didn't say anything more. She understood that even if she asked, she wouldn't get anything out of him. But it seemed her boss knew. So, she would just ask Yuki later to find out Asahi's purpose. Soon, Yuki got up and let both of them into the room. Yuki-sama, I've pretty much handled my matters. But this guy was waiting outside early in the morning. I feel he has some ill intentions, Sarge said, glancing at Asahi, who was also called in. He did have ill intentions. But he's already paid the price. Now he can be considered your colleague. Yuki's one sentence directly baffled Sarge. She didn't understand how, in one day, Asahi had become her colleague. Looking at Sarge's baffled expression, Yuki directly told Sarge what happened last night. Asahi knew Yuki would say it. Asahi now felt somewhat hopeless. Another person knew about his dark history. If a few more knew, he might as well just wait for human technology to advance rapidly and then immigrate to Mars. This is really something a midnight chef would do. Sarge was speechless. No wonder Asahi would listen to Yuki and become her colleague. It turned out he was caught stealing last night. Stealing was something many midnight chefs would do, so Sarge wasn't surprised that Asahi would do such a thing. However, being caught stealing was unacceptable for a midnight chef. And Asahi was different from normal midnight chefs. Asahi was a top talent among the younger generation of midnight chefs. If the reputation of being caught stealing spread, then Asahi wouldn't need to make it in the culinary world in the future. Sarge put herself in Asahi's shoes. Undoubtedly, she would also make the same choice as Asahi. Between working for a few years and a lifetime of social death, she still knew which was the best choice. You don't need to laugh at him. Don't casually spread this matter, understand? Yuki reminded. Hearing this, Sarge's smile receded. However, she received a signal from Yuki's words. Don't casually spread it, which meant it could be spread, just depending on the situation. After everyone was ready, they returned to WGO headquarters. And at WGO headquarters, they learned about Yuki bringing back 2 midnight chefs at once. That Sarge lost to him and was subdued by him is understandable. But why would Asahi Saiba be with him? Mana Nakiri looked at the information in her hand, completely baffled. I don't know either. It seems something happened in between. But as for what exactly happened, our people also couldn't find out. And shook her head. She was very confused. Everyone knew Yuki had subdued Sarge, so no one found it strange that Sarge came back with Yuki. But the problem lay with Asahi Saiba. WGO's intelligence department, though strong, the agreement reached between Asahi and Yuki was made in secret. Even if WGO's people were monitoring them around the clock, it was impossible to know about their agreement. Anne, help me call Irina over. Unable to figure it out, Mana Nakiri simply stopped overthinking and asked Anne to help call her daughter over. Hearing this, Anne quickly nodded and then found Irina Nakiri. Irina and Hisako hadn't gone with Yuki. Now they were learning various cooking techniques all day. Both of their culinary skills were improving very quickly. Hearing her mother was looking for her, Irina immediately went over. Afterwards, Anne also left because she couldn't listen to what was next. It was their family matter. Mother, is there something you needed me for? Irina asked with some confusion. And to call her over at this time, there must be something relatively important. It's about your half-brother. Yuki's mission over there has been completed. And this time, he subdued that midnight chef. Asahi Saiba appeared there and had contact with Yuki. Now he has also come back with Yuki. So, you need to make a decision now. Mana Nakiri told Irina about Asahi coming back with Yuki. Hearing this, Irina was somewhat dumbfounded. She never expected Yuki to not only bring back a midnight chef subordinate from his trip but also bring her half-brother back with him. At this moment, she wasn't thinking about what exactly happened but began to ponder. As Mana said, she needed to make a decision now. I've thought it over, mother. Let him join the Nakiri family. No matter what, he is my half-brother. And from the information you collected, it's clear he's not the same kind of person as that man. Because she had experienced the time when her loved ones left, Irina felt her brother was very pitiful. She had at least experienced a period of warmth, but what about Asahi Saiba? He had grown up in a cold environment from a young age. To be able to maintain his current state after growing up in such an environment was already very good. Since you've made a decision, then go ask for his opinion. I'll communicate with your grandfather, Mana Nakiri said with a smile. In the future, the Nakiri family would belong to Irina. And Asahi joining the Nakiri family was a good thing. After all, Asahi's talent was evident. In Mana's view, if Yuki didn't exist, then Asahi might be the only hope to solve the God's Tongue's drawback. His special ability was very overpowered. And although there were some minor flaws in his character, considering Asahi's upbringing, being able to maintain such a state was already very good. Considering all these, Mana naturally wouldn't negate her daughter's decision but was very supportive. Chapter 104. Brother and sister reunited, the cautious Asahi Saiba. Hearing her mother's words, Irina Nakiri was very happy. After Irina left, Mana Nakiri took out her phone and called her father, Senzaman Nakiri. Is that you, Mana? Do you need something? After the call connected, Senzaman Nakiri asked directly. Although his daughter had already reconciled with his granddaughter, she wouldn't just call him to chat, so there must be something. You saw right through me, father. Do you remember what I told you before about Asahi Saiba? Mana Nakiri asked. After finding out that information and reconciling with Irina, she had sent the file to her father. At that time, Senzaman was somewhat baffled. The Nakiri family's intelligence network wasn't as vast as WGO's, so he hadn't known about this matter. He was quite surprised when he suddenly heard that Azumi had another child. Of course, I remember. So, this call is about Asahi Saiba? Senzaman asked. That's right. Just now, we received news that Asahi Saiba came to WGO headquarters with Yuki. It seems he's been taken under Yuki's wing. Though he has nothing to do with us, he is, after all, Irina's biological brother. So, I asked for Irina's opinion just now. She wants to bring him into the Nakiri family, so I'm calling to ask for your opinion. Mana Nakiri told Senzaman about Irina's decision. I see. Since Irina has already made a decision, then I won't say much. Your thoughts should be the same, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have called me. Senzaman said, somewhat amused. Since it's Irina's decision, I, as her mother, naturally support it. And father, you also know Asahi Saiba's talent. There are no major problems with his character, he's completely different from that man. Letting him join the Nakiri family is very good, Mana stated her thoughts. It's not a bad thing. However, the final decision still rests in his own hands. Senzaman said. The decision was in Asahi's hands. If he didn't want to join, it would be useless even if they agreed. Irina has already gone to find them. I'll contact you immediately once I have news, father. Mana Nakiri nodded. Now, it all depended on Asahi's own choice. After hanging up the phone, Mana Nakiri handled her work while waiting for news from her daughter. Meanwhile, after Yuki and the others got off the plane, they soon met Irina Nakiri and Hisako Arado, who were waiting for them. After seeing Sarge beside Yuki, both Irina's and Hisako's expressions changed slightly. Keep in mind, Yuki had already maxed out Irina's favorability. Under such circumstances, him having a great beauty by his side, Irina would naturally feel some hostility. As for Hisako, she felt that since her young lady liked Yuki, she had to help. Seeing a potential love rival for her young lady appear, she couldn't remain calm either. Sarge, however, didn't treat them as enemies because she had already completely submitted to Yuki. Although she was just a budget version of Estef, her personality was quite similar. Yuki had conquered her, she would follow Yuki wholeheartedly and wouldn't have other thoughts. So, she didn't see Irina and Hisako as her enemies. Asahi Saiba, looking at these people's expressions, felt like there was a show to watch. He hadn't yet realized that this show might very well be about him. Welcome back, Yuki. And this is? Irina Nakiri took the initiative to ask about Sarge. This is Sarge, the opponent from this commission. But now she's one of us. As for this one, his name is Asahi Saiba. He can also be considered my subordinate now. Yuki introduced the two and also introduced Irina and Hisako to them. Hearing the name Irina Nakiri, both Sarge's and Asahi's expressions changed because Irina was the second wielder of the God's Tongue. Though Irina wasn't very famous now, the prestige of the God's Tongue was very high. Mana Nakiri was the best example. Someone with the God's Tongue was at least a first-class chef and very likely to become a special-class chef. After everyone got to know each other, Irina turned her gaze to Asahi Saiba. Have we met before, Ms. Nakiri? Why are you looking at me like that? Asahi felt somewhat strange being stared at by Irina and took the initiative to ask. Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Irina Nakiri, and I am your younger sister. However, the next second, Irina's one sentence directly stunned everyone present. This time, even Yuki was somewhat surprised. After all, in the original story, Asahi was recognized because his cooking was tasted by Mana. The God's Tongue tasted something similar to Azumi Nakamura's flavor in Asahi's cooking, which was why she directly investigated Asahi's background, ultimately confirming Asahi was Azumi's son. But this time, Irina seemed to already know. This surprised Yuki somewhat. Why, younger sister? Ms. Nakiri, you must be mistaken. I know my origins. I lived with my mother when I was little. Speaking up to this point, Asahi Saiba suddenly realized something. Because he didn't know who his father was, and his mother's constant scolding and beating him back then were all because of this so-called father. Now Irina said she was his younger sister. Then there was only one possibility. His father was her father. Thinking of this, Asahi felt like his head was about to explode. Looks like you've already guessed. That's right. While our mothers are not the same, our father is the same. This is what happened back then. Saying this, Irina showed the information on her phone to Asahi. While Asahi was looking at this information, the others waited there. This guy's father should be that fellow who caused a huge stir at WGO before, right? Sarge remembered the statement from WGO before. Mana Nakiri and Azumi Nakamura no longer had any relationship. That's right. It's Azumi Nakamura. Yuki nodded. At this moment, Asahi Saiba finished reading the information in his hands and knew his birth was entirely an accident. He knew why his mother had regretted giving birth to him so much back then. To put it bluntly, his appearance was because of an accident. His mother and Azumi didn't have any relationship. It was just that his mother, by some twist of fate, had given birth to him. His father wasn't someone who abandoned his wife and child, he simply didn't even know he had a son. However, after learning about his father's actions, Asahi's fists clenched. Now he had accepted the fact that Irina was his biological sister. Though Azumi Nakamura was also his father, how could a father instill such wrong ideas into his own daughter and also cause so many problems? First impressions are very important. Asahi had never met Azumi, he had always felt Azumi was the one who abandoned his wife and son, so his first impression of Azumi was quite poor. Although he now knew the other party hadn't deliberately abandoned them, judging from the things recorded in this file, Azumi wasn't a good person either. His own sister, her mother left her side since she was little, and her father instilled some wrong ideas. This made Asahi feel some empathy. So now, he subconsciously stood on Irina's side, feeling extreme disgust for Azumi. Looking at Irina before him, Asahi had many things he wanted to say, but the words at the tip of his tongue, he didn't know what to say. He felt somewhat apprehensive now. Asahi Nii-san, it's okay for me to call you that, right? Looking at Asahi's appearance, Irina saw his apprehension and took the initiative to speak. Why yes. It's okay, little sister. Asahi Saiba immediately replied upon hearing this. He originally didn't know if he should call Irina little sister. Though they were biological siblings, her status was different from his. Irina was the young lady of the Nakiri family. He, on the other hand, was just an accident. Originally, he wouldn't feel inferior because of his birth, he wasn't that kind of person. But when facing his biological sister, the situation was different. That's good. Actually, I came to find you this time, Asahi Nii-san, to invite you to join the Nakiri family. Although our childhoods weren't completely the same, there were similar situations. Asahi Nii-san should also value family very much, right? I'm the same. So, I want to invite you to join the Nakiri family. Irina's decisiveness at this moment was quite like that of a strong woman. In this matter, she was actually firmer than anyone else. In the original story, even when Asahi was wavering, she wasn't, but instead went to console him. Invite me to join the Nakiri family? Hearing this, Asahi Saiba was completely dumbfounded. He was already very happy to know he had a sister. He never expected her to invite him to join the Nakiri family. That's right. I value family very much. While that man is still alive, Asahi Nii-san has also seen what kind of person he is. I don't want my relative to wander alone outside. So I want to invite you to join my family. Irina said. Asahi had now achieved considerable success in his career. To put it bluntly, Asahi was still alone, he had no relatives. Now, two relatives had suddenly appeared. On Azumi's side, although he was his father, this father's actions made it so Asahi would definitely not contact him. So, only Irina was left. Why had Asahi always wanted to replace Soma Yukihira? Wasn't it just to have a family? Now this opportunity was placed right before him. And this was his biological sister. Asahi was moved. He was about to agree, but suddenly he calmed down. If you invite me like this, the Nakiri family probably won't agree, right? Asahi thought. He was, after all, Azumi's son. The things Azumi did in the Nakiri family caused the Nakiri people to be very hostile towards Azumi. If he, Azumi's son, joined, he would not have a good time. And he was more concerned about Irina. I've already communicated with Mother's side. Mother's meaning is to completely listen to my opinion. And Mother has communicated with Grandpa, Grandpa also agrees. Our opinions have reached a consensus. Now it all depends on your decision, Asahi Nii-san. Irina shook her head. She wouldn't bear any pressure. It had to be said, the Nakiri family people were all very rational and wouldn't transfer their disgust for Azumi onto Asahi. Everyone knew very well that Asahi was the most innocent one, very innocent from birth until now. Born because of an accident, his subsequent days barely experienced any maternal love, all he had were various beatings and scoldings. What Azumi Nakamura did had absolutely nothing to do with Asahi Saiba. Everyone knew this principle, but when actually experiencing it, many people would still be affected by emotions and transfer their views on someone they disliked to others related to this person. In reality, not many people could achieve the Nakiri family's level. In the original story, at the end, the timeline had jumped to the later stages. Asahi had stayed at the Nakiri family for many years, but from his performance, one could also see that he wasn't ostracized in the Nakiri family, otherwise, he wouldn't have shown such a casual side. See, can you give me some time to think about it? Asahi Saiba asked. When he said this, his tone was cautious. He was afraid. Afraid his words would be interpreted as not wanting to accept this kindness, so he spoke very carefully. Having finally found a real relative, Asahi didn't want to lose them. His performance also made Yuki somewhat amused. Even when caught stealing knives, Asahi hadn't been this timid. It was clear Asahi really cared about this newly met sister. Chapter 105, Returning to Tatsuki, an unexpected large bait haul. Of course. This kind of thing needs to be carefully considered. Irina Nakiri nodded. She had also spent a lot of time before making her final decision. She naturally wouldn't demand Asahi give her an answer right now. Hearing this, Asahi Saiba also breathed a sigh of relief. He indeed needed time to calm down right now, otherwise, he really couldn't think seriously under such circumstances. Afterwards, Asahi Saiba and Sarge temporarily stayed at WGO. While both were midnight chefs, and WGO people didn't welcome midnight chefs, they were both subdued by Yuki. Yuki's prestige at WGO was second only to Mana Nakiri's. In fact, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before Yuki surpassed Mana. With Yuki as their backer, no one dared to say much in front of the two, at most just muttering some complaints behind their backs. In the following time, Sarge learned a lot of secretarial experience from Hisako Arado. However, in terms of culinary skills, Sarge was countless tiers stronger than Hisako. In terms of being a secretary, Hisako was a true veteran. The two could also be considered to be learning from each other. Sarge learned secretarial experience, while Hisako learned culinary skills. Sarge was a bona fide chef very close to the first-class level. A chef of this level was not comparable to Hisako. Hisako wasn't from Polar Star, so her culinary skills weren't much different from the original story. She wasn't even a senior chef yet, though she was very close. Sarge's culinary techniques and experience were enough for her to study for a very long time. Actually, during this period with Yuki, he would also teach them. With Yuki's guidance, their culinary skills improved not slowly, but it still required time to settle. A week later, Asahi Saiba made his decision. He, just like in the original story, joined the Nakiri family, changing his name to Asahi Nakiri. For him, his father, Azumi Nakamura, was not suitable to be family. But Irina Nakiri really cared about him, so he also cared very much for this younger sister. After learning that Irina liked Yuki, Asahi began to find all sorts of ways to create opportunities for the two to be alone. Irina was quite grateful for this. Though they hadn't spent much time together, there was no sense of unfamiliarity or estrangement. Just like that, a month passed in the blink of an eye. The Stagiaire event was also considered over. Yuki planned to pack his things and return to Tatsuki. During this period, Yuki received a large bait. The harvest from this large bait was very special. Yuki was already used to large bait fishing out secret techniques and special abilities. But this time, what was fished out was actually a recipe for a potion. This potion recipe originated from the world of Toriko and was developed by IGO, International Gourmet Organization. Its effect was very simple and crude. To transform poultry. Increase the meat yield and make the quality of the ingredients better. This potion could raise the meat quality of average poultry to a level just below a level 1 creature, that is, the level of white-haired Cinderella beef. Although not yet level 1, ingredients just below level 1 were also better than any ingredient in the Food Wars world. Most importantly, the things in this potion recipe could all be found in the world of Food Wars. It didn't completely require things from the world of Toriko. The effect of this potion was very good. After injecting it into normal poultry, the transformation would be complete in just a week. Unfortunately, the effect of this potion couldn't be completely passed on to the next generation. While the next generation would retain some effects, they would be weakened. After 3 generations, the potion's effect would disappear. But even so, it was enough. The materials for this potion recipe weren't precious or hard to find. This was equivalent to giving Yuki a stable source of ingredients. Although he could often fish out ingredients from the world of Toriko with small bait, and there was also a chance to fish out ranked ingredients. The quantity was always limited. It was enough for Yuki to eat himself and occasionally treat the people around him. But if there were more people, it wouldn't be enough. Yuki had already used his authority at WGO to find the materials for the potion and had even made some finished products. But now he was going back to Tatsuki, so Yuki didn't experiment at WGO. He planned to go back and try it on the chickens and ducks Yoshino Yuki raised. It was a good chance to help Yoshino realize her dream. Wasn't she solely focused on wanting to research the so-called Polar Star chicken? Now the opportunity had come. Soon, everyone returned to Tatsuki. Sarge and Asahi also came along to Polar Star. While they weren't Polar Star residents, nor were they Tatsuki students, since they were Yuki's secretary and hired help, living at Polar Star was completely fine. Polar Star only had so few people, there were still many empty rooms. After seeing Soma Yukihara, Asahi didn't react much anymore. After all, he had now joined the Nakiri family and had a biological sister. He no longer needed to pursue a fake family. He had given up his plan to replace Soma. At this moment, he was just simply curious about Soma. Wow, Yuki. You went on a trip and brought back a great beauty. Aren't you afraid Alice and Megumi will give you trouble? Yoshino Yuki asked teasingly after seeing Sarge. Sarge is my secretary. She will help me handle various trivial matters in the future. There's no other relationship. Yuki wasn't afraid. As the saying goes, a clear conscience fears no accusation. He wasn't like Azumi Nakamura. Sarge was indeed beautiful, but Yuki now only intended to use Sarge as a secretary. While he thought so, others didn't. Especially Megumi and Alice. Sarge was very beautiful, had a good figure, and her aura was impeccable. Most importantly, she did cosplay. That's right, in their eyes, wasn't Sarge's attire just cosplay? Sarge's appearance made Megumi and Alice look at each other. They felt a sense of crisis. So, they decided to have a chat later. They could fight among themselves, but they couldn't let an outsider take advantage. Afterwards, Yuki introduced Sarge and Asahi to everyone. After learning their identities and culinary skills, everyone was stunned. They never expected these two, who didn't look much older than them, would actually be second-class chefs, and both had culinary skills to compete with first-class chefs. These two could be said to be enhanced versions of Kojiro Shinomiya. Others had only tasted Shinomiya's cooking, but Soma had spent some time at Shinomiya's place during his stagiaire. After a period of contact, Soma knew just how strong Shinomiya was. After all, the gap between a senior chef and a second-class chef was still very large. Now these two were even stronger than Shinomiya. Of course, what was even more surprising was that Yuki had directly taken these two under his wing. Speaking of which, what is a midnight chef? Soma Yukihara's one sentence directly caused everyone's brains to shut down. This was like a chef in the world of Cooking Master Boy asking what the Dark Cooking Society was. Perhaps everyone was used to Soma frequently asking stupid questions, so they simply told Soma various information about midnight chefs. So there's such a group of people in the culinary world. That's quite interesting. Soma, after listening, didn't show the disgust, worry, or fear, but was very interested. This was very in line with his character. What he cared about was only the strength of culinary skills. It is quite interesting. But you'd better honestly improve your own culinary skills. Otherwise, with your senior chef level skills against these guys, you'll be eaten until not even bones are left. Yuki said, somewhat amused. In the later stages of the original story, to accelerate the plot, the original settings were directly discarded, directly allowing Soma and the others' culinary skills to leap to the international level. But now this was reality. Soma's talent was very good, not at all weaker than Asahi's. However, Asahi was still a bit older than them, so they still needed time to grow. After everyone chatted for a while, Fumio Daimito arranged dorm rooms for the two. Since they were people brought by Yuki, there was no need to say much more. However, after arranging their rooms, two more people soon came to Polar Star. Irina? Little attendant? Why are you guys here? Alice Nakiri was completely surprised after seeing Irina Nakiri and Hisako Arado arrive at Polar Star. Obviously, to move into Polar Star. We've already spoken with Auntie Fumio before, Irina said with a smile. Though there was an entrance assessment. With their culinary skills, it was naturally almost too easy. An Elite 10 member wanting to join Polar Star, and she was the young lady of the Nakiri family Fumio Daimito wouldn't refuse. What? You're moving into Polar Star? Why? Hearing this, Alice was even more confused. Initially, Senzaman had suggested Irina move into Polar Star. But at that time, Irina had refused. In the end, it was Alice who moved in and started chasing after Yuki. Now Irina's arrival made Alice feel an even greater sense of crisis. Before, when she knew Yuki and Irina were going to WGO together, she wasn't very worried. After all, based on her understanding of Irina, this girl wouldn't directly cling to him, she would keep her distance from Yuki. But now it seemed everything wasn't going in the direction she had guessed. And it was even the opposite. Irina's personality had also become much more cheerful than before. Alice could even see such a genuine smile on Irina's face, which was absolutely impossible before. If Irina could return to normal, Alice would have been happy in the past. After all, they were still cousins, relatives. While there were some minor conflicts, it wasn't some deep-seated hatred. But now Alice couldn't be happy. Just having Sarge already increased her pressure immensely. Now Irina had come too, and even brought along a completely obedient little attendant. Honestly, a follower like Hisako Arado, anyone would be envious. Not only was her ability strong, but she was incredibly loyal, always siding with Irina in everything. She didn't even need to think to know that Irina coming to Polar Star was definitely for Yuki, otherwise, there was no explanation for why Irina would appear here. Naturally, for Yuki. Facing Alice, Irina had no intention of hiding her purpose at all and said it directly. As soon as these words were out, Alice was completely dumbfounded. It couldn't be helped, because these words came from Irina's mouth. If it were anyone else, she wouldn't be surprised. But Irina's saying it was completely different. She didn't understand how Irina, this tsundere, could possibly say such a thing directly. What she didn't know was that although Irina was still a little bit tsundere, when it came to Yuki, there was absolutely no tsundereness left. Irina knew very well that she hadn't had much contact with Yuki before, so compared to Alice and Megumi, she was definitely at a disadvantage. To still beat tsundere in this situation, there would be no game to play. After all, tsunderes in manga usually appeared as the losing heroine. She didn't want to become the golden-haired loser. After untying the knot in her heart, Irina couldn't care less about such things now. And looking at Alice's baffled appearance at this moment, she was quite satisfied. Chapter 106, Alice and Megumi's Alliance, Nurturing Polar Star Chicken. So you're here to steal my man? After coming back to her senses, Alice Nakiri said unhappily. She didn't come before when invited, but now she's showing up. Suddenly having another rival, this made Alice very unhappy. It's just fair competition. Irina Nakiri wasn't going to waste words with Alice. After dropping that line, she left. She still had many things to have moved in, so she needed to go oversee it now. The threat from Sarge is already big enough, and now Irina is here too. I need to have a good talk with Megumi. Thinking this, Alice Nakiri went directly to Megumi Tadakoro's room. Seeing Alice, Megumi wasn't very surprised. But Alice's next words left her stunned. Megumi, our threat isn't just Sarge. There's also Irina Nakiri. I don't know what got into that girl, but now she's moved into Polar Star to compete with us for Yuki. Alice Nakiri told Megumi about Irina's purpose. This left Megumi completely baffled. Megumi, now is not the time for infighting. We need to form an alliance, at least to defeat these two first. Alice Nakiri proposed. Her proposal was accepted by Megumi. That's right. Although the two of them were competitors, now two more rivals had appeared. At this time, they needed to present a united front. The two were also friends, so they formed an alliance directly. What they didn't know was that their only enemy was Irina. As for Sarge, although she was Yuki's subordinate, she wouldn't have any improper thoughts. If Yuki needed her, she would naturally be willing. If Yuki didn't ask, then she would always remain a subordinate. Irina Nakiri, on the other hand, having shed most of her tsundere attributes, was terrifyingly strong. Her existence was a considerable threat to both Megumi and Alice. In the evening, to welcome the four newcomers, everyone held a banquet. With more and more people at Polar Star, the banquets became livelier. At Polar Star, Yuki took out ingredients from the world of Toriko. What are these ingredients? They're so delicious. Asahi was also a man of the world and had seen all sorts of high-class ingredients. But the ingredients Yuki brought out were things he had never seen before. These are super rare ingredients that only Yuki can bring out. We only get to taste them once in a while. Yoshino Yuki stated. This was a delicacy only Polar Star residents could enjoy. To be able to taste this deliciousness once in a while is already great. Sarge said. The deliciousness of the ingredients themselves surpassed everything. Even if a normal chef cooked them, the resulting dishes would be extremely delicious. At this moment, Asahi Nakiri was even thinking, maybe he should just forget about that so-called 3-year term. To be able to often eat such deliciousness, he was willing to work for Yuki. My God's tongue doesn't have any aversion to the ingredients themselves, even if they haven't been cooked. Yuki, can these ingredients be supplied? Irina Nakiri's eyes lit up. To test if the God's tongue could accept these ingredients, she had directly gone to the kitchen to taste some raw almond cabbage. The result, the deliciousness of the ingredients, made her eyes light up. Although Yuki had previously made dishes that the God's tongue could tolerate, the problem was, Yuki couldn't possibly keep cooking for Mana Nakiri. Now that Yuki had returned, if Mana wanted to eat, she would have to come back. But Mana's status meant she couldn't possibly keep running back and forth. And Yuki wasn't her private chef, so wanting Yuki to keep cooking for Mana was impossible. But these ingredients appearing now seemed to be able to solve this problem. Don't even think about it, Irina. These ingredients are limited. I asked Yuki about it long ago, there's no way to get them out to supply you. Alice Nakiri shook her head. Yuki's ingredients might be useful, but there was no stable supply. That's right. I told Alice before, these ingredients can't be supplied stably. However, I've also been trying to find a way. It will still take some time for verification. Yuki said. The potion formula he got from the system already had finished products. Next was to experiment on the chickens and ducks Yoshino Yuki raised. Ha! Has there been progress? So, does this mean we can eat these ingredients all the time in the future? Yoshino Yuki and the others asked, their eyes shining. There has indeed been some progress. Further experiments are needed next. Yuki, we'll need to use your chickens and ducks. Maybe this time we can really create your long-cherished Polar Star chicken. Yuki nodded and took out the potion he had prepared. The moment the potion was taken out, it attracted everyone's attention. What is this? Megumi Tadakoro asked with some confusion. A potion that can improve the meat quality of poultry. And it only takes about a week to see results. I plan to try it on Yuki's chickens and ducks tomorrow. Is that okay, Yuki? Yuki asked. These chickens and ducks were carefully raised by Yoshino Yuki all along. If she didn't agree, Yuki wouldn't force it. Of course, it's okay. If we can really develop Polar Star chicken, that would be great. Let's go try it right now. Yoshino Yuki's eyes were practically sparkling. With such an opportunity, she would naturally agree. Don't mind how Yoshino usually treated these animals as her treasures. When it came to cooking, Yoshino showed no mercy to these animals. She wouldn't hesitate in the slightest when it was time to slaughter. It's too late now. Let's wait until tomorrow. Yuki said. But now, after hearing this news, how could anyone have the mind to wait until tomorrow? So, a group of people directly went to Polar Star's breeding area in the dark. So there's a breeding area here too. This dormitory is quite interesting. Sarge and Asahi Nakiri had attended school before. They hadn't seen many schools of Totsuki's scale. And Polar Star was also very special. Now, for a dormitory to actually have its own breeding area surprised them. This is all thanks to the Shokuchiki system here in Japan. It's precisely because of this system that Polar Star can make its own decisions. Polar Star's breeding area and planting area were all fought for by the Elite 10 of the Golden Age. Ryoko Sakaki told Sarge and the others about Polar Star's past. So that wandering chef also came from this dormitory. That's really something. Sarge was quite impressed. Joichiro Yukihara, needless to say, his reputation was quite prominent. Both Sarge and Asahi were very surprised after witnessing the culinary skills of the Polar Star residents. Don't look at the Polar Star people's culinary skills now, excluding Yuki, the highest was only senior chef, but how old were these students? At this rate, before graduation, most of these people would probably reach third class. 2 or 3 years after graduation, becoming second class would be normal. At that time, these people would only be in their early 20s. Even using the two of them as a reference, this group's talent was quite terrifying. As they spoke, the group entered the breeding area. Besides raising some chickens and ducks, there were also animals like rabbits. Everyone even saw a deer here. Yoshino Yuki was very skilled, she could even get deer to raise. When everyone arrived, the animals were already asleep. However, due to too many people, the animals naturally sensed their arrival. It was a good thing these animals didn't have high intelligence, otherwise, this scene could be described as a horror movie. After all, waking up suddenly to find so many monsters around, it would be strange not to be scared. Seeing the animals wake up, Yoshino Yuki directly took the lead in catching them. Of course, their targets were chickens and ducks, after all, Yuki's potion only worked on poultry. Just like that, one chicken and duck after another was quickly captured by everyone. Yuki also took out the syringe and injected the potion he had prepared into these chickens and ducks. Yuki, bring out all your feed. For the next period, these chickens and ducks' appetite should increase dramatically. Yuki reminded. These potions were to improve meat quality. Besides quality, the quantity would increase. To grow meat, one needed to eat. So, next, these chickens and ducks would all become big eaters. Sure enough, after Yuki's words fell, these chickens and ducks that had been injected with the drug began to stir restlessly. They could now feel intense hunger. Hearing this, Yoshino Yuki also quickly brought out the feed she had stored. Seeing this food, the chickens and ducks all rushed over quickly, as if possessed by starving ghosts. Feed that was originally enough for these chickens and ducks for a week was quickly emptied by these fellows. And after finishing, these chickens and ducks kept staring at Yoshino Yuki, the meaning very clear, they still wanted to eat. Yoshino Yuki didn't hesitate and brought out all the feed in stock. This feed had been stored for an entire semester, plus enough for the vacation period was stored. Just like that, these chickens and ducks ate an entire month's worth of reserves in one meal. Afterwards, the chickens and ducks, which had clearly swelled up a fair bit, fell into a deep sleep. They can eat so much. One meal, and a whole month's worth is gone. Yoshino Yuki was somewhat frightened. This is the effect just after the potion is injected. It will weaken a lot later. In the end, their appetite will only increase to about 3 times the original. Yuki said. This potion was somewhat similar to gourmet cells. People injected with gourmet cells would become very big eaters. These chickens and ducks were like this now. Of course, this thing wasn't gourmet cells. Gourmet cells were the fundamental power system of the world of Toriko. The food these chickens and ducks ate would be converted into energy, continuously transforming their bodies along with the drug, making them grow more robust and their meat quality better. Unfortunately, the drug Yuki had only worked on poultry, it didn't work on other animals. Otherwise, Yuki wouldn't have spared the rabbits and deer Yoshino Yuki raised. After returning these chickens and ducks to the breeding house, everyone left. Next was just to come observe the condition of these chickens and ducks every day. After returning, everyone continued the banquet. This banquet lasted until late at night. Afterwards, everyone went to rest. They had just finished the stagiaire, so the next few days were holidays. This could also be considered a benefit. Early the next morning, everyone came to the chicken coop. The chickens in the coop had already grown a circle larger in size at this time, and each one looked full of vigor. These chickens weren't afraid after seeing everyone. The things researched by IGO were indeed very good. These potions would only increase meat quantity and improve meat quality and wouldn't make these things become aggressive. The drug is taking effect too quickly. These little guys have clearly grown a circle larger. Yoshino Yuki could clearly perceive the changes in these chickens and ducks. This was only the first day. It was hard to imagine what these chickens and ducks would become after a week when the transformation was complete. Look quickly. Is there another pair of wings growing here? Although it's still very small. At this moment, Megumi Tadakoro suddenly said. After everyone looked over, they indeed found that a very small pair of wings was growing behind the chicken's wings. Yuki had actually seen this change from the beginning. Don't worry, this change is benign. Maybe by then you'll be able to eat chicken with 4 wings or 5 legs. And the eggs might even have multiple yolks. Yuki certainly hadn't forgotten the 10-yolk egg that appeared in the world of Toriko. That kind of ingredient was truly exaggerated. This drug developed by IGO, the increased meat quantity wasn't just about making the body size larger, wings, legs, and the like would also increase. Although it looked somewhat horrifying, this mutation was benign. This meat wouldn't cause any harm to the human body. Chapter 107, Yuki's Meet and Greet? For the next few days, everyone kept an eye on the chickens. As Yuki had said, these chickens not only grew an extra pair of wings, but the wings were also getting bigger, and they even grew extra legs. Their size was also soaring, reaching a height of 1.5 meters, almost as tall as a person. Keep in mind, the largest chicken in the world today, the Brahma chicken, was only 1.2 meters tall. Yet these polar star chickens and polar star ducks grew to a height of 1.5 meters, and this transformation wasn't even complete yet. Perhaps they really could grow larger than a normal person in the end. Fortunately, after these chickens and ducks grew larger, their temperament became more docile, with no aggression. Otherwise, raising such chickens and ducks would really be a big problem. The expenditure on feed put some pressure on Yoshino Yuki. However, there were quite a few wealthy people in this dormitory, so a large amount of feed was directly prepared, which finally allowed Yoshino to breathe a sigh of relief. Autumn leaves viewing? Meeting with the Elite 10? This event sounds quite interesting. A few days passed, and the school was about to reopen. For students participating in the autumn elections, another event specially prepared for them also began. That was the Autumn Leaves Viewing. This was a meet and greet between the Elite 10 and the Elite 10 candidates. In the past, it was always the top 8 meeting and exchanging with the Elite 10. But this time, the top 8 became the top 16. It couldn't be helped. There were too many strong individuals. And the people in the top 16, if placed in previous cohorts, were indeed all Elite 10 candidates. Yuki knew about this meet and greet. In the original story, this was the time when the Elite 10 members were most complete. In previous Autumn Leaves viewing parties, the purpose was to let the Elite 10 candidates see the Elite 10, to make them admire the Elite 10 more. But this year, Irina Nakiri looked at Yuki. Yuki was strong in this meet and greet. The Elite 10 side should have been on the higher side, and the Elite 10 candidates on the lower side. But this time, the situation was completely reversed. Because of Yuki's presence, the status of both sides in the Autumn Leaves viewing was directly switched. In the past, when those Elite 10 members faced Elite 10 candidates, they would often act very arrogantly, showing a dominant side, which was a kind of deterrence to the junior students. But with Yuki present, this deterrence no longer existed. Just like that, time came to the next day. More than half of the top 16 were from Polar Star. They set off together. When they arrived at the location, everyone else, besides them, had already arrived. Why do I feel like these Elite 10 members are different from when I saw them before? Soma Yukihira asked with some confusion. Due to Yuki, they had met many Elite 10 members before. But now, these Elite 10 members were completely different from their previous state. These Elite 10 members all looked like they had lost their previous arrogance, instead, they had become much more obedient. That's right, the feeling they gave off now was obedient. Speaking of which, this matter is actually because of Yuki. Irina Nakiri said with a smile. Of course, it was because Azumi Nakamura calling Yuki. Yuki rebuked Azumi at that time and then told Irina about Azumi's plan. Irina, upon learning of this plan, told her mother. Then a series of things happened. Azumi played himself out and was directly stripped of his surname. The Elite 10 members involved in this plan this time were warned. And they also gradually figured out what exactly was going on afterwards. After figuring it out, they wished they could slap their past selves a few times. After all, they had done such a brain-dead thing. Having figured it out, they didn't dream of acting up anymore. It wasn't that they were too stupid, but because they had become somewhat too inflated. After becoming Elite 10, they were the decision-making level at Tatsuki. Many times, their power was even higher than the professors. Being in such a high position without sufficient awareness, gradually, they naturally also got lost in power. It was precisely because they were inflated that they were tricked by Azumi, fooled by a bunch of grand promises. So that's what happened. Yoshino Yuki and the others suddenly understood. At the same time, Alice Nakiri finally understood what Irina's change was all about. It turned out that everything that happened in the Nakiri family during this period was inextricably linked to Yuki. It all happened because of Yuki. Alice Nakiri knew about her family's affairs. So, after this series of operations by Yuki, he didn't even need to deliberately pursue Irina. Irina's favorability towards him filled up on its own. Now that she understood everything, she became more troubled. Because after this series of operations by Yuki, the probability of Irina changing her mind was almost zero. After the Polar Star people arrived, everyone else who was already seated stood up directly. This was all because of Yuki. This autumn leaves viewing directly turned into Yuki's fan meet and greet. Yuki had been quite famous at WGO headquarters during this period. His series of operations far surpassed the achievements Kojiro Shinomiya had made in these years. So, he became the idol of other students. Not even these Elite 10 members were exceptions. I never thought this autumn leaves viewing would turn into Yuki's fan meet and greet. Some people even asked Yuki for an autograph. Yoshino Yuki couldn't help but complain. They were all from the same dormitory, so even if Yuki became so awesome, they didn't have many thoughts. But others were different. They couldn't interact with Yuki all the time. So, after seeing their idol, they naturally wanted an autograph. On the way back for the group, several trucks drove past them. The trucks were loaded with various kinds of building materials. So many building materials. Is Tatsuki going to build another big building? Soma Yukihira asked with some curiosity. Having been at Tatsuki for over half a year, he was no longer surprised by some of Tatsuki's things. For example, these trucks carrying building materials now. He was just purely curious about where construction was going to start again. It's about the school festival. It's almost time for the school festival, so some renovations are needed. Irina Nakiri said. Actually, anyone who had attended Tatsuki's middle school department knew very well what the situation was. Tatsuki did this every year. After use, most of it would even be demolished, leaving only some that looked very good. In the original story, Irina Nakiri also did something similar. Seizing others' research societies, then directly demolishing them to build her own culinary building. Tatsuki is really rich. After listening to everyone's explanation about the school festival, Soma Yukihira could only sigh that Tatsuki was very rich. For him, this money was undoubtedly an astronomical figure. Soma hadn't lacked money since he was little. His family wasn't exactly a super rich one either. Although Joichiro Yukihara was a special class chef, Joichiro didn't use his culinary skills to amass wealth. Money, for him, was just a number. Enough was enough. There was still some time before the school festival. Everyone's life returned to normal again. A week had passed. They finally saw the finished Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck. This is too exaggerated. They've grown so big. Even if a person rode on them, there wouldn't be any problem, right? Looking at the chickens before them, which had grown to be like ostriches, everyone was also incredibly shocked. You can ride them. I've ridden them several times already, Yoshino Yuki said with a beaming smile. Honestly, now she was somewhat reluctant to slaughter these Polar Star chickens and Polar Star ducks. But she also knew these chickens and ducks were ultimately ingredients, originally raised to be eaten. And they might even be the savior for the god's tongue. So, all she could do was not process these little animals herself. It was a good thing that although these animals had grown much larger, their intelligence hadn't increased, they had just become much more docile. So, it wouldn't make everyone reluctant to slaughter them. If they had the intelligence of a dog, they really might not have the heart to do it. In the end, it was decided that Yuki would do it. Chapter 108, The Successful Test on Irina. Hope arrives at WGO. After bringing a chicken back to Polar Star, Yuki took out his largest 7-star knife. Through his evolving vision, he had already discerned the body structure of this 4-winged, 6-legged chicken before him. Others had heard of the Raging Bull Blue Dragon Slash but hadn't seen it. At this moment, the large knife in Yuki's hand suddenly swung out a flurry of blade light. The blade light vanished in the blink of an eye. And the chicken before him also collapsed to the ground in that instant. Its feathers instantly disappeared, and the chicken's body directly opened up, just like the dissected cow, clearly dissected, yet not a single drop of blood could be seen. Hiss. What kind of technique is this? Is it really not a special ability? Asahi Nakiri asked with a baffled expression. The others at Polar Star had told him about the Raging Bull Blue Dragon Slash, saying it was a technique. But now looking at it, was this really a technique? This technique was more awesome than a special ability, okay? Irina Nakiri, Hisako Arato, and Sarge were dumbfounded watching this scene. Although the others were also shocked, they had already gotten used to Yuki's various ridiculous operations. And with the heads-up Yuki had given them before, they were much calmer than these few. Now is not the time to be amazed. Don't you want to test the effect of this meat on the god's tongue? Yuki reminded. Hearing this, only then did everyone remember what to do next. After bringing the dissected chicken back to the kitchen, they began to cook. This time, Yuki wasn't needed for cooking. Because Yuki's culinary skills themselves were of a rule-breaking level, the dishes he made had no reference value for the god's tongue. Letting the others from Polar Star make the dishes was undoubtedly the best choice. Soon, a rich aroma began to continuously diffuse outwards. Just smelling this aroma made everyone's mouths water. One after another, incredibly enticing dishes were brought to the dining table. However, everyone resisted eating and instead planned to see what evaluation Irina Nakiri would give in the end. Looking at everyone's expressions, Irina Nakiri also picked up her chopsticks and began to taste everyone's dishes. At this moment, she was very nervous, completely devoid of her previous queenly aura. After all, this was the hope for solving the god's tongue's drawback. Delicious. I can't taste any flaws at all. It really worked. At least for my god's tongue, it worked. Irina Nakiri said with pleasant surprise after eating a piece of meat. The others' culinary skills weren't stronger than hers. For the dishes they made to make her unable to taste any flaws meant that the Polar Star chicken had successfully solved the drawback of the god's tongue. That's great. It worked. Hearing Irina Nakiri's words, everyone was overjoyed. They all knew about the drawback of the god's tongue. Being able to solve this problem was undoubtedly the best outcome. Everyone, let's taste it together, Irina Nakiri said. Hearing this, everyone immediately picked up their chopsticks. So delicious. It's not at all inferior to most of the ingredients Yuki brought out before. Megumi Tadakoro said with pleasant surprise after tasting it. The various strange and wonderful ingredients Yuki brought out now, the taste of Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck could already compare to most of them. According to Yuki, he couldn't mass-produce those previous ingredients. But these ingredients now were different, these were ones they had nurtured themselves. These ingredients still need to be tested. Sarge, I'll leave this matter to you, Yuki said. Although he knew the system's items couldn't possibly have problems, others didn't know. So, Yuki asked Sarge to take some of the meat for testing. Let me help. I'm more familiar with things here at Tatsuki. Hisako Arado spoke up. There was an ingredient testing facility within Tatsuki. Sarge had only just arrived not long ago, so Hisako stepped forward. Afterwards, the two of them handled this matter together. Because Irina Nakiri wanted the data, there was no need to queue at all. All sorts of reports were produced at the fastest speed. No problems at all. In fact, the nutritional value has increased many times over. It can be said that Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck have now become highly nutritious ingredients. Looking at the report in hand, all aspects of the testing had met the standards. Most importantly, the nutritional value was extremely high. This was also within Yuki's expectations. After all, these modified ingredients were second only to level 1 ingredients. Ingredients from the world of Toriko had a characteristic. They were highly nourishing. Of course, people from the world of Toriko wouldn't have any problems eating those ingredients, even without gourmet cells. Looks like these ingredients can't be eaten every meal, huh? Otherwise, it'd be easy to get fat, Yoshino Yuki said, looking at these reports. Only Yuki has the potion for nurturing Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck. And it can only be passed down for 3 generations, with diminishing effects each time. These ingredients are destined not to be mass-produced. You shouldn't even think about eating them every meal, Ryoko Sakaki reminded. Those kind of ingredients were very precious. They didn't know the cost of Yuki's potion, but it definitely wasn't cheap. Besides that, there was also the nurturing cost. Although they could be nurtured in just a week, the amount of food consumed during this week was considerably large. So, the cost was also an issue. This meat was destined not to become a common food. At this moment, everyone's gaze turned to Yuki. Only Yuki had the potion, and the nurtured Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck could only be passed down for 3 generations with diminishing effects. That is to say, although this ingredient could be artificially nurtured, once Yuki was out of the picture, it would become an extinct ingredient. Send a portion to WGO first. We'll talk about the rest later, Yuki said. Only he knew the potion formula. His plan was to see if it was useful for Mana Nakiri. If it was, then he would let Mana handle its operation, he just needed to wait to collect money. This formula wasn't very useful to him personally. After all, he had small bait that could continuously provide ingredients, and all sorts of them, with a chance of getting ranked ingredients from time to time. The deliciousness of those ingredients far surpassed the current Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck. Of course, even if he brought it out, it would be for cooperation. Although he wasn't short of money, he wouldn't just give this formula to others for free. As for whether ill-intentioned people would get their hands on it, with WGO backing him, not many would dare to play such games. At that time, Yuki wouldn't even need to make a move, WGO would crush the other party first. So, there wasn't much need to worry about the safety of the potion formula. Hearing this, everyone nodded. Indeed, although this meat had an effect on Irina's god's tongue, it was still uncertain for Mana's side. Irina Nakiri immediately had someone send a piece of the meat directly to WGO by private jet. At WGO, Mana Nakiri was currently slumped on her desk with a helpless expression. Because Yuki had left, she hadn't been able to eat anything these past few days. Although Yuki had left some dishes behind before, these dishes ultimately couldn't be preserved for long, otherwise, the taste would be ruined, and she still wouldn't be able to eat them. So, Mana was quite helpless at this moment. She had already decided that once her work was more or less handled, she would immediately go back for a visit. And, at the side, looked at Mana with helplessness. It couldn't be helped. Who else but Yuki made food that Mana could eat? Actually, with Mana's financial resources, she could completely use a private jet to transport ingredients for herself at any time. Although she had the money, the person who made the dishes was Yuki. Yuki wasn't her exclusive chef, so she couldn't forcibly demand Yuki cook for her. If she wanted to eat, she could only go back and freeload. Just as Mana Nakiri was feeling helpless, her phone suddenly rang. Picking it up, she found it was her precious daughter calling. "Irina, is there something you need?" After connecting, Mana asked weakly. "It's like this, mother." After Yuki returned to Polar Star, he used some special drugs to nurture a kind of ingredient called Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck. The deliciousness of these ingredients can satisfy my god's tongue. Even if it's a dish made by a chef whose skills are inferior to mine, I can still eat it, and the god's tongue won't give negative feedback. I've already had someone send the ingredients to you. It will still take some time to arrive. I'll send you the ingredient inspection report first. Irina Nakiri explained the reason for her call. After hearing this, Mana Nakiri, who had been listless, instantly perked up, her posture straightening immediately. "Good. I understand. I'll look at it now." After ending the call with Irina, Mana Nakiri quickly opened the inspection report Irina had sent. How? Chicken and duck meat actually have such nutritional value. After reading it, Mana Nakiri was stunned. It was hard to imagine that the report in her hand was actually for chicken and duck meat. At this moment, she anticipated that ingredient even more. She immediately had and keep a close eye on the ingredient's movement. Once the ingredient arrived, it was to be immediately sent to the kitchen to be made into a dish. She couldn't wait to taste it. If she could really eat this ingredient, then the drawback of the god's tongue would be solved at its root. Although the report indicated this ingredient couldn't be eaten continuously, for her, even eating it once every other day was already very good. So, Mana's anticipation was now maxed out. Chapter 109, Incomparable Ingredients, the Nakiri Family's Plan, the Shocked Senzaman Nakiri. After some time, the ingredients arrived at WGO. And immediately sent the ingredients to the kitchen. What ingredient is this? How can it have this good quality? The chefs in the kitchen were no simpletons. They discovered the problem with the ingredients the moment they received them. They were all somewhat baffled because this ingredient wasn't any kind they recognized. It looks a bit like chicken and duck meat, but there are many differences. And this large piece of meat, it can't possibly be chicken or duck meat. Looking at the meat before them, these chefs fell into deep thought. Now is not the time to dwell on these things. Make all these ingredients into dishes. This is lunch for the special class officer. Anne's one sentence jolted the kitchen chefs awake. Hearing this ingredient was actually for Mana Nakiri to eat, they were even more surprised. Lady Anne, the dishes we make. Special class officer Mana probably can't eat them, right? One of them couldn't help but ask. As everyone knew, Mana's god's tongue simply couldn't stomach the things they made. So far, only Yuki had made food that Mana could eat. You don't need to worry about that. You just need to make it. Anne shook her head. Hearing this, although the others didn't know what Anne really meant since it was an order from a superior, they naturally started cooking without hesitation. As for whether Mana would judge it as unpalatable anyway, besides Yuki's dishes, even special class chefs' dishes would be called unpalatable by Mana, so they didn't need to dwell on it. Soon, one dish after another was made. At the same time, a rich aroma began to spread in all directions. This aroma, WGO people had never smelled anything like it. Anyone who smelled this aroma directly followed it to the kitchen. However, after learning this food was prepared for Mana Nakiri, they also distanced themselves a bit. But they didn't completely disperse because this aroma was simply too rich. Just this aroma alone could make one eat several bowls of white rice. And if they waited here, after Mana's dishes were taken away, Maybe they could even get a little bit of the leftovers. It wasn't that they were shameless or hadn't eaten good things before, it was just that this aroma was too enticing. Never mind these people, even the chefs responsible for cooking and herself were constantly swallowing saliva at this moment. After the dishes were prepared, they were quickly sent to Mana Nakiri. Because Yuki had stayed at WGO for a month, Mana's body had also recovered quite a bit. Although still in a sub-healthy state and worse off than an average person, it was much better than the paper-thin person she was at the beginning. In terms of aroma alone, this ingredient has already surpassed any I've ever encountered. Mana Nakiri said, smelling the fragrance lingering in the air. As she spoke, she picked up her chopsticks, impatiently putting a piece of meat into her mouth. At this moment, both she and beside her were very nervous. After all, this ingredient concerned whether the drawback of the god's tongue could be resolved. It would be a lie to say the two weren't nervous. It works. Although the god's tongue still provided feedback on flaws, it didn't infinitely amplify the flaws but tasted the deliciousness. After eating a piece, as the deliciousness exploded on her taste buds, Mana Nakiri's body even trembled. After the god's tongue went out of control, it would infinitely amplify the flaws in a dish, thereby making a dish that tasted very delicious seem like rotten food in her mouth. But now, although there were still flaws, and quite a few at that, these flaws weren't amplified. As long as the flaws weren't amplified, it was good news for Mana Nakiri because she could eat these foods. Even if it was made by those chefs in the kitchen, she could eat it. Then what about dishes made by a first-class officer? And herself, she was a special class officer, also a special class chef. So, as long as she had these ingredients, she could completely make dishes herself. Congratulations, Lady Mana. From now on, the drawback of the god's tongue will no longer be a problem. Hearing this, Anne at the side smiled and congratulated her. This is indeed good news. And, you come and taste some too. Mana Nakiri said with a smile. After a meal, both lay on the ground, extremely satisfied. It couldn't be helped, they had eaten too much and didn't want to move. The current Mana Nakiri could eat until she was full. Unbelievable. This is really chicken and duck meat. Anne said with emotion. If she hadn't known from the beginning it was chicken and duck meat, she wouldn't have recognized it at all. It really is. But now there's another problem, the supply of ingredients. After Mana Nakiri calmed down, she began to think about what to do next. This ingredient still came from Yuki. Irina had already told her that these ingredients were nurtured over a week, using drugs provided by Yuki. And these chickens couldn't be continuously nurtured. The 3-generation diminishing effect meant this ingredient was monopolized by Yuki. So, next, she would have to talk to Yuki again. These ingredients are provided by Officer Yuki, and only he can provide them. Lady Mana, are we going to Tatsuki? And knew Mana's next plan upon hearing her words. It could only be said she understood Mana too well, worthy of having been by Mana's side for so long. We do need to go back. It's a good time to see father. And if I remember correctly, Tatsuki's school festival should be starting soon, right? And, I'll leave this matter to you to arrange. Finish up the work at hand as soon as possible, and then we'll go back. Mana Nakiri said after sitting up from the ground. Leave it to me, Lady Mana. I'll handle the work at hand as quickly as possible. And also sat up and quickly nodded. Although still very full, she knew now was not the time to rest. After Anne left, Mana Nakiri directly dialed her father's phone number. Is that Mana? Looks like you've already received the ingredients. How is the situation now? Senzaman Nakiri, who received the call, quickly asked. Clearly, he already knew Irina had sent the ingredients to Mana. Because not only Mana's side, but he also received a portion here. Senzaman, after receiving this ingredient and the inspection documents, quickly had someone make the ingredient into a dish. This taste instantly captivated him. After tasting it, he had been waiting for Mana's call. While this ingredient seemed to have extremely high commercial value, and if they secured the rights to operate this ingredient, it would elevate the Nakiri family by more than just one level. But where did he have the mind for business now? His only thought now was to wait for his daughter to send back news. He needed to know if Polar Star Chicken and Polar Star Duck were effective for his daughter's God's tongue. Now the call had come. He asked this question at the first opportunity because he knew his daughter calling him was definitely to talk about this matter. Father, you also know about it, huh? Right, your side would definitely get the ingredients before me. I have good news here. This kind of ingredient, even if it's a dish made by a senior chef, can satisfy my God's tongue. Although many flaws will still be tasted, these flaws won't be amplified. The deliciousness I taste is much more than the flaws. As Manna spoke, a smile couldn't help but appear on her face. After being tormented by the God's tongue for so long, she could finally escape its shadow. Ha 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 ha. That's great. That's really great. Hearing this, Senzaman Nakiri couldn't help but laugh out loud. It couldn't be helped. He had been suppressed for many years. These years, to solve the God's tongue problem, their entire family had paid far too much. It could be said he had already thought of every possible method and had tried them. But all these years, it had always been failure. Now, finally, success. Yuki had successfully solved the drawback of the God's tongue. Hearing her father's laughter, Manna Nakiri didn't speak. She knew she had let these family members down these years. The problem originated from her. She had always been the one causing a lot of trouble. Her family had always been bearing the pain for her. So, when Senzaman was venting, she didn't speak. After a good while, the laughter finally stopped. Senzaman Nakiri sat back down in his seat. Ahem, now we can talk about serious business. Senzaman, after venting, couldn't help but blush a little. He had made a fool of himself in front of his daughter. At this moment, to ease the embarrassment, he changed the subject with a very stiff tone. Father, you should also know about the ingredients, right? The nurturing of these ingredients was done by Yuki using drugs. Only Yuki has this drug, and the successfully nurtured ingredients can only be passed down for 3 generations. I'll be rushing back as soon as possible. So, I'll have to trouble Father with the subsequent matters. Manna Nakiri said. She intended to let her father talk to Yuki about cooperation. One reason was because her father was closer. Another reason was to get some benefits for the Nakiri family. These years, the Nakiri family being able to thrive also had Manna's contribution. Although she had left the Nakiri family, she was still a Nakiri and cared about her relatives. Plus, with her current power, if there were any suitable benefits, she would reserve them for her family. Nakiri International being able to develop so quickly also had a considerable contribution from Manna. This was the effect of power. As WGO's sole special class officer. As long as WGO's interests weren't harmed, her actions like this were also tacitly approved by everyone. Anyone serving as an officer would more or less use their power to gain some benefits for themselves. I understand. I'll go talk to Yuki. However, it won't be so easy for the Nakiri family to swallow such a large cake. So, WGO must intervene. Senzaman Nakiri naturally knew what Manna meant. But with the Nakiri family's scale, wanting to directly swallow this cake wouldn't work. WGO needed to intervene. WGO, as the largest organization in the culinary world, once WGO took over, other powers, even if frustrated, could only keep it to themselves. No problem. I'll also handle this matter as soon as possible on my end. Manna Nakiri nodded. Chapter 110, So Nakiri's Astonishment, Yuki's Business Acumen. After ending the call, Senzaman Nakiri didn't immediately go to find Yuki but called another person, So Nakiri. So had also been busy with Manna's matter. This good news naturally had to be told to So at the first opportunity. Alice Nakiri's side had sent some meat to So and Leonora Nakiri. But because it was relatively far, and not so urgent, it would still take some time. After hearing his father's words, So Nakiri was stunned. There's actually such meat? So Nakiri suddenly felt that the Nakiri International he managed seemed somewhat redundant. The establishment of Nakiri International, besides making the Nakiri family go international, also had another point: to use cutting-edge technology to solve the drawback of the god's tongue. But now, the potion Yuki brought out seemed to be following the cutting-edge technology route. And he succeeded, while their side still had no progress. Although Nakiri International had grown considerably now and had established a firm foothold, there had been no progress at all in dealing with the god's tongue's drawback. Mano will be back during the school festival. You should come back then. Our family hasn't gathered together for a long time, Senzaman Nakiri said with some emotion. Ever since the children had their own careers, they rarely met with him. And ever since Mana's incident, the family had never reunited. No problem, father. I'll handle the matters at hand as quickly as possible. So Nakiri was taken aback for a moment upon hearing this, then quickly gave a reply. Because he also wanted to reunite with his relatives. Humans, after all, are creatures that value emotions. And although their family was a wealthy one, they valued kinship much more than benefits. Hearing his son's reply, Senzaman Nakiri smiled. After saying a few more words, he hung up the phone and then directly had someone prepare a car to head to Polar Star. After arriving at Polar Star, everyone else had already gone to class. Only a very few people were at Polar Star, among whom was Yuki. Grandpa. Asahi Nakiri immediately greeted Senzaman upon seeing him. While they weren't related by blood, since he had joined the Nakiri family and become Irina's older brother, it was appropriate to call him Grandpa. Looks like you're adapting quite well. In a few days, the other family members will be back. I'll introduce you to them then. Senzaman said with a smile. These words, however, made Asahi somewhat nervous. He had just joined, so Nakiri and the others were still very unfamiliar to him. Don't worry, Asahi and I-san. Everyone in the family is very easy to get along with. Irina Nakiri said, seeing Asahi looking somewhat nervous. With her words, though Asahi didn't completely let go of his inner nervousness, he also relaxed considerably. Grandpa, you should be here to find Yuki, right? He's over at the breeding area. As Irina spoke, she led Senzaman over. The reason Yuki was in the breeding area was because Alice and Irina had brought over many poultry. Yuki's potion worked on all poultry, so naturally, they all had to be experimented on. The meat quality of Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck was very good, but the taste of the two ingredients also had certain differences. So, Yuki wanted to see if he could create more ingredients. Besides that, there was now another person in Polar Star's breeding area, Ikumi Nito, who had been roped in as a laborer. Her family ran a breeding farm, so Irina thought of her at the first opportunity. Ikumi Nito had followed Irina precisely to curry favor. Now the opportunity had finally come. Upon receiving the order, she immediately went to the ranch herself, selected the best various poultry, and brought them over. For this, she even took a day off. Soon, the few of them arrived at the breeding area. Senzaman Nakiri finally saw what Polar Star chicken and Polar Star duck looked like. This is too big. I have never seen such huge chickens and ducks. Looking at those huge chickens and ducks, even Senzaman Nakiri was plunged into shock. Seeing Senzaman like this, Ikumi Nito, who was helping to feed various animals on the side, couldn't help but smile. Because she was scared when she first came. Who had ever seen those big chickens and ducks? The world's largest Brahma chicken, at 1 meter 20 in height, was already quite frightening. But this one exceeded 1 meter 80, even taller than an adult man. It could even be used as a mount directly. Most importantly, after interacting for a while, she found that these frighteningly large chickens and ducks had incredibly docile temperaments. They had no intention of attacking people at all. This was even easier to raise than normal chickens and ducks. So much so that Ikumi Nito was now somewhat reluctant to leave. She really wanted to stay here all the time. After Yuki injected these animals with some kind of drug, these animals became voracious eaters. She was now constantly moving various feeds out just to let these animals eat their fill. Director, you're here. Yuki wasn't surprised by Senzaman's arrival. After all, the potion he possessed was quite crucial. As long as Senzaman wasn't a fool, after confirming the ingredients were useful, he would definitely come looking for him at the first opportunity. You should know why I came, right? In that case, I won't beat around the bush either. Mana will still take a few days to come back. So, I will first talk to you about the sales rights for these ingredients. Senzaman said with a smile. I'll trouble you to discuss this with my secretary. I don't understand these aspects. Yuki stated. He really didn't understand. In comparison, Sarge knew much more. Having been in the Midnight Chef circle for so many years, she was quite knowledgeable about this aspect. Senzaman Nakiri didn't feel Yuki was deliberately slighting him by not personally discussing it. How old was Yuki? Having his current culinary skills was already quite impressive. He knew very well what kind of person Yuki was. While not exactly a cooking fanatic, he wasn't far off. Yuki's mind was almost entirely focused on improving his culinary skills. If he were also all-round in business aspects, that would be truly miraculous. So, asking him to talk to Sarge was merely because he wasn't good at it himself. Yuki wasn't an arrogant person. Of course, even if Yuki were arrogant, Senzaman actually wouldn't have much opinion. With Yuki's current achievements and status, he could completely put on airs. Afterwards, Senzaman Nakiri and Sarge went to one side to discuss the upcoming cooperation. The Nakiri family couldn't swallow this large cake by themselves, but with WGO as backing, they could take a larger bite. Although the lion's share would still go to WGO, the Nakiri family could also make a fortune this time. Senzaman Nakiri showed great integrity, so the two didn't talk for long before reaching an agreement. The subsequent contract needed to be drafted by Sarge. Once the contract was drafted and Yuki signed it, the cooperation between the two parties would be established. After finishing her discussion with Sarge, Senzaman Nakiri didn't leave but watched the constantly feasting animals with great interest. The appetite of these animals is very large. No wonder they can grow so big in just a week and undergo those changes. Towards the four-winged, six-legged polar star chicken and polar star duck, Senzaman felt it was very incredible. For those changes to occur in just 1 week, it was hard to imagine just how overpowered this drug was. He was even thinking, if this drug were used on large-sized birds of prey, what would they turn into in the end? However, he didn't want to try. After all, such creatures had strong aggressive tendencies. It wouldn't be good if some monster was created. What Senzaman Nakiri didn't realize was that Yuki had already been thinking along the same lines. In fact, Yuki was planning to have someone get him a few birds of prey to experiment on. As for getting attacked by these souped-up birds, Yuki hadn't even considered it. The reason was simple: the drug developed by IGO had an effect that made birds of prey docile. This was why these chickens and ducks became even more docile after growing larger. Everyone knows chickens can be surprisingly aggressive, not just with each other, either. Even people who raise chickens are often chased by some roosters. After observing for a while, Senzaman Nakiri turned his gaze to Ikumi Mito. This girl. I remember her. She's from the Mito family, isn't she? Senzaman remarked. He had a vague recollection of Ikumi. The Mito family had always been closely allied with the Nakiris. To stay in the Nakiri's good graces, Ikumi's family had been pushing her to follow Arina Nakiri since before she even set foot in Tatsuki. When it came to loyalty, Ikumi might not have been on Hisako Arato's level, but she wasn't far behind. That's right. And all the animals here were personally selected by Mito-san from her family's ranch and delivered, Irina confirmed, quite pleased with Ikumi. To her, Ikumi was an incredibly useful subordinate. Looks like we can deepen our partnership with the Mito family moving forward. After another glance at Ikumi Mito, Senzaman Nakiri left. Since he had already settled things with Sarge, once the contract was signed, someone would need to be in charge of raising the livestock. The Nakiris had plenty of ranching families they worked with, they could pick anyone. But now that Ikumi Mito was here, then choosing the Mito family was fine. That wraps up this part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.